Alrighty, figuring all this stuff out. No, it doesn't do anything. Okay. Let's see here. All right. Wowzers. I don't know what's going on here. I swear, you update a program and everything goes to crap. Isn't that fun? Alright. I don't know what just fell, but probably something I needed. Yeah, the thing that's not supposed to fall. Great. I gotta figure stuff out. But in the meantime, I can cut, even though I was supposed to do this in advance. I didn't. So there's that. Of course, you gotta be much more careful than I'm being. But I am doing it off camera because I gotta look at it better. Right now, I'm trying to get the whoozy what's it that hold it in here. It's a technical term, whoozy what's it. So I gotta figure out just how deep it goes and make sure that my whoozy what's it's go in the appropriate depth. Before I glue them in. Otherwise, this will never clamshell together with this other half. So that's fun. This is very coarse sandpaper. I wouldn't use it for actual pieces you're going to see, but I use it for things to get it deburred or thinned down a bit, that just scraping and stuff doesn't really handle too well. And it does a pretty good job. Because this is going to get glued, I don't need a real like interference style fit. What I need is to make sure it sits down where it's supposed to, so when it's glued in like an anchor point, you can then glue the other side with, you know, anchor point style, and you have yourself a connection that's gonna hold, right? These are just meant to be like reinforcements, so you're not just lining up two flats. You're able to locate them and hold it in place. That's what these are for. So this one seems pretty good. So a little bit of cleanup there just to make it feel a little smoother, so not that it matters, it's not for paint. Where are the rest of them? These are all valid questions that you shouldn't be asking at this time, because one should know. Oh, there's one that's got to get cut. So that's 3 out of how many? 7. 3 out of 7. You know, respectable, I guess. Gotta do a cleanup run next time. That's for sure. One of these days we'll actually get paint down, not just in this, but I actually touch the Astartes. Oh, hey. Right in front of my face. So there's 4 or 5. There we go. All of them are here. So I got another one that's pretty well done. We'll just sand it down, make sure it is really well done. I don't even know what grit this is. This is 120. So it's pretty coarse. Not the coarsest thing you can get out there, obviously. But for dealing in this scale and dealing in this type of plastic, it's pretty coarse. You wouldn't want to use this on your model. But it gets the job done for what I need. Because these things are not going to be seen. So pop them in. Make sure that they fit, which they do. And then do a bit more cleanup. And, you know, Bob's your uncle, as they say, right? Alright. Jeez. The tight is good, but also not. I don't want it to be that difficult to remove. Not that it matters, but I want to be able to put the glue on and slide it down. And as silly as it sounds, glue does provide some resistance when things are pretty close to a friction fit, and it can cause some impedance. So, trying to work it a bit, but yeah, I think that's good. I hope. Clean that up. This should definitely be good to go. Yeah. 2 out of 7. Realistically, you could probably triangulate it, right? You're just using 3 and get it to be good, but this file gave me this many to use for a reason, so I'm going to use it. I think with folding the paper is for these U points, you can just put it in between the little U points and do the thing, as it's once said. I think that one's gonna be pretty good, but I didn't like the way the slot looked. Look carefully. It's a little better now. Yep, so that's 3. There it is. Like, I know I had the other one. Obviously, when you have plastic in the middle, you want to cut it. You don't want to just try to sand into that. Problem with the sandpaper is it makes stuff get everywhere. So I collect it and I put it off on a little. I have a garbage plate. It's a garbage plate. More useful than you might think for a cleanup, because you can just put it into your hand and put it on the plate. Throw everything out, or at least just clean off the plate when you're done. It's a paper plate. You don't want to use your actual like plates. It's not ideal. Not ideal. In case anyone was wondering, cutting towards yourself is not ideal either. That's why I do it off camera, so you can't see me doing it. Let's see here. Something's amiss. I don't like what this program has done. I don't like it one bit. I guess it's okay. How strange. Very, very strange, as they say. Let's see here. Weird. Weird. Let's just get back to it. That's all I can do. Hard to see, so pardon my dust. What we got going on here is progress. Get that. do as I do. Be more careful. But I'm not going to say to be stagnant in your carefulness, but you want to be careful. I'll go in here again, sand it down. See if we can't get two halves of a torso put together. Where'd that go? What's going on here? What was that? Let's see here, shall we? All right, let's adjust some stuff. Whoops. Camera. There you go. Alright, let's see how stuff is fitting. Nope. That was weird. I hate when it does that. Alright. It's a little tight, which is good and bad. At least for me. I don't... Again, I want to be gluing this and using it more as a locator and less like friction fit. So I really want to make sure it can seat all the way down. Couldn't find the tool I was looking for. So I kind of forgot what it looked like for a second. So I'm just scraping with a mold line scraper. It does a pretty good job of, you know, if you're not too crazily aggressive, it doesn't cut in per se. It scrapes along the shape. And that, in turn, smooths things out and gets some of those burrs and stuff off. Yeah. That feels good. The sandpaper has a good like rough-in job. I'm gonna call it that. And the scraper is a nice finisher for stuff like this. I don't need to be presentable because it's a secure like anchor point. You're not gonna see it. You're not meant to see it. And I'm not putting a lighting source or the battery or anything in the center, so I don't need it to be able to come apart. Not that it should anyway with the other stuff that's gonna go on it. And I just needed to snap in all the way to the center. Kind of like that. And then call it. So now, rough cut out. I know my whole blue thing is a cutting board, but I have an older, this green one, that I just think takes a cut better. It's not very bendy, so you don't see the cut, if that makes any sense. Like when you cut into the mat. I don't know if that's better or worse, but I like it. So it's better for me. How about that? You're going to want to try to get your big plastic scraps off of your workplace so you don't confuse it for a part or confuse a part for scraps. If you confuse it for a part, it's no big deal. You go to look at it and you go, oh wait, that's just garbage. But if you confuse a part for garbage, that could be a big deal. So, be careful. And, you know, don't be afraid to take it out of camera and look at it up close because I gotta make sure I'm getting the cuts right. Nope. I think this Zacto handle has had it. It's not really holding the blade very well. So be careful with that. This is probably over a decade old, that X-Acto handle. So I can't really fault it now, can I? I mean, I could, but what's the point? You know, it's funny when you print these things out, or you're dealing with like multiple pieces of the same concept that you got to clean up like this. You kind of dread it at first, like, ah, this is gonna be so tedious. It's so many parts. I gotta do the same exact thing. And then a lot of the times, I mean, sometimes it is tedious and it's a little annoying, but a lot of the times you get to doing it and you, oh, you know, the first 1 to 2 might be a bit of a learning curve. Then you're like, oh, it's not so bad. And before you know it, you're working on 6 out of 7. So, you know, don't always dread the tedium. Sometimes it goes faster than you realize. If I wasn't doing it like this, I'd have a movie on or something, a show, to kind of help, right? You just don't want to be too caught up in it. I don't like necessarily watching certain things for the first time, especially if I'm a fan, like, which obviously why would I be watching it if I wasn't a fan? But like, I wouldn't want to watch something that I really don't know what's going on for the first time while doing this, because then I'll end up just paying attention to that, and this will take a back seat, and then nothing gets done. I do have certain kind of go-to shows or movies that I'll put on while doing stuff. Things that I don't have to focus on, because I know more or less what's going down. I've seen them before. And if I want to, I know when I can like take a break and focus on what I'm watching. Otherwise, it's just like kind of like background stuff to help pass the time. Music does the same thing, obviously. But be it music or a show or a movie or something, is enough to turn what is a sort of tedium into a decent time. And I think that's all of Ghost Bear. So that clicks in. That's number 6 done. The real trick's gonna be gluing this stuff. Weird. All right. One more cut jab, and then we can get the torso together. Which is a nice step in the right direction of getting this model built. Owie. Even though I'm not cutting through the part, it's never good to put a blade towards your hand. But sometimes you gotta do what they tell you not to do. But I didn't tell you to do that. You should never do that. So, yeah. So I wanted to kind of put some type of posting out there or something that the stream was happening and get this going a little earlier. But ever since I updated the program, it's just been playing havoc with my stuff in terms of settings and whatever else, which is quite annoying. So I had to mess with that, which took longer than I'd like. I don't even know if I got it where I like it, but I think I got it where it's serviceable. So there's that. So if you stumble across this after the fact, sound off. And you know, subscribe, bell, all that silly stuff that they constantly tell you on the YouTubes, so you can get caught up with the next one. Which is not the right sequence of words to use, because you're not going to get caught up with the next one, because that would imply you're not going to show up. But anyways, I'm just trying to get the bulk cutting done so I can get the final bits of cleanup underway. It's also important when you reach the end of something like this, like these 7 pieces. You do something tedium, or you have like a batch or something you're doing and you get towards the very last one or so. Don't suddenly cut corners or try to cut corners or figure out time savings. By this time, if you didn't do it already to a point to your liking, you're not gonna suddenly magically have that. And you can end up with results you're just not that pleased with and may have to redo or whatever. So just try not to pay attention to the fact that you're almost done. You know, don't count your chickens before they hatch type of concept. Instead, we wait until they hatch. Now luckily this is something that I don't need it to be perfect anyway. I just gotta make sure it fits the way I want it to fit. And even still, you don't want to rush it. So there's that. Let's see where we're gonna put you. Hey, I like that sound. That sound usually means it's positive ID. So Tamiya clear cement shenanigans. For doing this, what I'm going to do is just double check all the sides. Well, not like that, because you want to make sure it all fits in. And this is a little tight. In fact, very tight. There we go. So then we clean up the hole a little bit. It is meant to be. I don't know what that was. It felt like a plastic shard. It is meant to be tight. It's not excessively tight. That's better. Let's do a quick scrape. Because what happens with certain prints I've discovered with my mediocre printing skills is that some of these holes, just due to the heat and everything and the layers, may sag a little or just not be perfect. The dimensions are there, and it will friction fit quite nicely. Sometimes you got to open them up just a little bit to do that. It's no big deal. Especially in something like this where I have multiple anchor points and I'm going to be using glue. So the biggest thing I don't want to happen is there to be any burrs or stuff when they sandwich together. I want it to be good and flat. So, looks like we're getting there. A little extra something something for the road. Alright. So I'm gonna use this on the anchor points. And then slide that anchor point in until it does that clicky thing. And then I'm gonna let that set. I'm gonna put glue on both sides. I'm going to let that sit in there to hopefully. That friction sound means that it's definitely going to have the glue make contact with points. So that's good. And then we just do that for the rest. I'm only putting on one half, but on both sides of that half. So that way it's still fresh plastic more or less when I go to connect it to the other half. And I'm going to let that sit for a little bit. And that's going to just be so I can be a little rough with it and it doesn't just pop out or slide or anything like that. Which is important because I really want this to be as perfect as possible for sandwiching together so the seams are really easy to address. You don't want to create your own version like a mold slip, which is part of why I want to use all of these pegs that are provided in the file and not leave any out. That way it's a good bite, as you could say. And then it's just a case of cleanup of the seam and whatnot. I was hoping it's not too gigantic of a gap. Because the goal is to have it look like it's one solid piece, the torso. After all. You wouldn't want it to be looking like a sandwich two pieces together. That kind of defeats the whole purpose. Now we let that dry a bit, cure, bond. What's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. Which means we could figure out a way to glue part of this onto the cockpit head thing. 9000. So I don't think I want to do it that way. I think I want it to be flat-ish. Something like that, and then with some carefulness. Oh, it's a small piece to see, but more importantly, since I'm gluing, I might as well get into a glue phase. I'm not using any clear canopy parts, so I'm just basically gluing the cockpit paint, armor panes down, and then I'll have to paint the effect because I can't do a good clear print. Did I do it backwards? Yeah, there we go. So instead, I'll get a good solid joint, and then I'll use the mud, the ever-present mud, and more or less use the mud to do that. Which would be fun. There's other paints too. In fact, there is 3 more that I gotta glue onto that cockpit. I think this is one of them. Yeah. Carefully clean this piece up. These tiny pieces are hard to show on stream, but since they have outward facing pieces, I want to be very careful with how I clean it up. The mud will be able to correct some mistakes, but I don't want to get too much of like a sanding gouge or anything. So if I can just peel and have it place in where I want it, kind of like that. That was actually really good. The glue will help with that a lot. I haven't done any mud on these, obviously, so the goal will eventually be to connect everything to the torso and then mud up what isn't mudded. Now, it doesn't mean I have to wait to do painting. I could start priming the legs, for example, if I'm happy with them. But I'd much rather get everything to the state of being happy with it, so I don't have to worry at all. 2 more pieces, and then we have ourselves the cockpit ready to go. Stuff like this, I'm gonna have to pay real close attention to, like source images of art and stuff in games to see the armor glass. So none of that is what I need. I don't think I printed the side panels for this yet. I didn't want to get too ahead of myself and have too much really flimsy thin parts. Might have been actually thinking for once. Just to me, a glue does work pretty well. I don't exactly, it's cement. I don't know why I keep calling it glue, even though, you know, you get what I'm saying. But I don't know exactly how long I should give it. Maybe a few more minutes, and then we're gonna marry these two sides together. Oh yeah. I'm feeling hopeful and concerned at the same time, because why wouldn't you at this stage? This is a big thing to mess up. So let's see. I'm gonna slather it in the cement, like all over the spikes, the anchor pieces, and then on all the flats here too, and probably a little bit on these flats. I don't think it works like what you needed glue on the cement on both sides, but it's helpful in my mind, and that's how I roll. If that made any sense, let me know. I'm assuming anybody watches this. We do have work time with this cement. It's not super flash off or hot or anything like that. So while I don't want it to take forever, I don't have to worry too much on a piece this big. I'll have work time. So that's always good. Still want to get it on all the anchor points. Not one to want to gloop it on, but I feel the little thicker it is, the little more syrupy it is in thickness, the longer it'll take to truly kind of set up. At least that's, in my mind, a tactic that I feel should make sense, but probably doesn't work. So, you know, there's that. So we get that. I want to really quickly hit this up with some sort of spots, particularly over each slot, not necessarily in it, just over it. A little film action. Definitely smell the glue. All right. This is where I try to figure out how to, there we go. And then we give it some force. Push on it. That's not too bad. There's still pieces to go and cleaning to be done. and a seam to fill that's kind of substantial, but we can use much thicker mud after we put the pieces in place, like this guy, which goes in somewhere like that. Obviously I'll glue it and cut things so I don't have to force it in and potentially snap stuff, like I kind of just did. I'm being too cavalier with it. There we go. This is why we don't want to mud things right away. We want to slide, sand, put things in their place. Like there's something that goes here and something that goes here. But we're getting there. That's a big step forward. Should something like that. Get the arm up there. Obviously I need to put pieces on there, but hey, that's what we call progress. That's looking sharp. Definitely gonna have to figure out a pose. It's gonna be very floppy until I figure out a pose. But I'm really pleased with that. The seam looks worse than it is, I think. Especially once I put all the pieces down that need to be down. I feel like the mud will really fit in nicely. Then you sand it down. Do some actual like body panel feeling almost, you could say, like it's an actual car. Even though it's not. This should sit something like this. It's not perfect at all, but something like that. Pretty cool. Yep, that would sit like this for the cockpit. This is also why we don't mud. Now I'm going to sand up this to make it a bit smooth and better in here. But yeah. And then once I get these on, I can finish the mud on the torque. Like this is a big step. I got some parts to print for the arms to connect in here. I'm not going to connect them in right away. I say that now, I might. And then mud and sand, and we're off to the races. We're getting this mech. It's funny, you have the two halves, but you put it together and suddenly it feels like real progress, right? Even though I've had these this entire time, it just feels like a mech more so now. That's a big chunk of thing right there. Here's a classic Battle Master for scale. Like, it's a big chunk of thing. But I almost have all the paints I'm looking to acquire. Which is good. A well and thorough mix should do wonders here. I'll probably do even if I talk about it on stream, because nobody watches this apparently. Hopefully soon we'll get some poor souls. But I'll probably also do a video about the paints. I'm going to do a video about the color scheme that I'm going for thus far, which is Smoke Jaguar Alpha Galaxy, because supposedly that's what the Ill Clan era Smoke Jaguars is kind of building themselves up as. You know, they got to rebuild the whole clan. So it would make sense they would start with Alpha Galaxy. And therefore I want to go with that. But, you know, you gotta first figure it out in terms of making sure that's exactly what it is. I think this sits up here. And then, you know, do the scheme. So that's... I don't think this isn't gonna fall apart. I just don't want to work too much with it while it's not officially cured or dried or whatever. So I'll clean out this little piece that sits on the back, so it can sit in the back. But not much left of actual part printing necessary. Probably knock that out in a day. Like when I have an actual day to do that. Or in sections, right? That's the first of 5 28mm or 160 scale mechs printed, and it just needs to be painted. I'm not going to wait for all 5 to paint them. That would be a nightmare, honestly, because that would be a whole heck of a lot of surface area that I need to cover. And there's no reason to batch paint it. No reason at all. So, with that being the case, I'm going to just clean up this a little bit off camera. Got hyper focused on trying to clean this up. My bad. But you know, them's the breaks. So the goal here is probably to get the mech fully ready for paint, not sectionally ready for paint. So more mud is in the future, especially because this whole piece haven't been muddy yet. But the goal is to do that, put some of the mist surfacer down, and then assess after that. I may need the sand, put more surfacer down, or more mud and then surfacer. This isn't the type of model or the time to get rushing on it, right? So I'm not going to do that. So it looks like, yeah, that fits like that, but I don't want to do that yet. In fact, I can glue that down now if I can get it out of there. Come on, you. There you go. Definitely important to not, when you're test fitting stuff, you kind of got to get a feel for it. When all of a sudden you can feel it, like, yeah, if I keep pushing this on, I'll never get it out. Or if I do, I'll damage or break something. And you just stop, because chances are it's going that route, so you know it's more or less fitting. So you can stop and preserve it. Now you might think, hey, I could use the plastic glue to kind of seam fill a little bit. And technically you probably could on certain stuff. I don't know about this. I know this is bonding, but I also don't want to potentially make it more of a nightmare to smooth out. So I'm not going to do that. Alright, I think that's fully in there. Yep. Kind of squished it a little bit. Not a big deal. That's what thick mud's for. Plus, we're going to say it's some battle damage at the end of the day if it's not perfectly how I want it. But that's one piece where it's supposed to go. More or less. And yeah, that's good. Where's the other piece? Here it is. This piece goes up in here. So let's cut the excess stuffs off. We gotta do this close to the eyes, so it's off camera. Some of this I feel is a result of me sanding it down a bit too extremely on certain sections of the mech, resulting in like that seam line down there. If you could see it. But luckily I can again fill it in And it's not something you're meant to really be focusing on anyway. So, also lucky. But yeah, you want some patience in doing some stuff, or you don't want to get too zealous in your sanding and whatnot, filing, etc., etc. Luckily, with enough different things to use, you can correct just about most any mistake, like crushing in your print a little too much, trying to push it down, because these are a little fragile. That's okay though. Did I want it to happen? No. Am I concerned about it? Also no. And just like that, we have most. We just gotta put the cockpit in. And that requires a cockpit getting 2 more pieces of armor glass, which I haven't printed out. And we gotta put this guy on. So I guess we could do that, but that's the back side taken care of. I don't want to put this antenna on just yet because I'm going to be flip-flopping around. I don't want to break it. I know what'll happen in my attempt to not break it. I'll fulfill the prophecy and break it, which would be most annoying. So, I'll take this garbage piece and I'll take my Bondo spot putty and I'm going to put a little dab on there. That's right, I'm going to do it. I'm going to attempt to get the filling in started of at least the piece I dented. Now this is old. Luckily it didn't come out too watery first. I don't know if that's the binder or whatever, but this stuff does smell, so you don't want to make it too strong on the odor. I'm not going to use it like mud, but I am going to take this piece and I'm going to use the mud as kind of like a way to wet it a little bit. Don't drop the mud. That would have been bad. So this is pretty thick, which is just what I need on the back here. So we are looking to gently sand this down once done. We're basically stuffing in Bondo as if it were a dented car. But we also got to be careful as there is detail back here. So a little bit of mud to soften that up. And kind of... I use the mud because it's got the acetone in it and it acts like a thinner even though it is mud already, which will help in making sure I don't completely gunk up the detail here. Just one little panel in that I will be able to scrape out once it's dry. So there's that. But if I can kind of do that first. You just don't want to lose sight of what is actually all around. Alright. The harder part is going to be actually putting the mud where I want it. So we dab it on there a little bit heavy and not perfectly flat. You want to stuff it. I'm stuffing it in there. So when it dries, because it will contract a little when it dries, it's still where I want it. And then I can sand it down smooth. We're basically pretending like we're doing body work on a car and doing it completely the wrong way, I'm sure. Because this is a model. So that's very thick, and very much more than I need. But that's okay, because through the miracle of sanding it down, I'll get most of it off and be left with exactly what I need. Hopefully. Right? Right. There. So we're going to let that dry. And with the excess I have out, I might as well stuff it in certain spots. Like down here. Because this is what I would have to do anyway, is put some out and stuff it into the seam. Now this is a big gap. It isn't really meant to be a gap filler, but we're going to force it because this isn't car work. And when you force it, eventually it kind of submits. If that makes any sense. And again, don't get horrified by how gross it's gonna look in this process. You want to take care by any real detail, of course, but where we can hide the crimes, we'll commit the more offensive crimes, you know what I mean? That's for miniature making, not for life. Disclaimer. Just be careful what you don't touch or do stuff on the spots you want to dry, like on that back panel piece, because then you have to redo it. So be careful with that. Even if it looks like it's going to not be a perfectly smooth thing, let it fully dry, let it do its job, and you come in and you critique it and you decide if you got to do it again. I'd rather have to put another pass down than it be too much and then I gotta fix it. You know what I mean? And I'm being more careful with that one in particular because you see it. Only when I'm doing that back underneath on the bottom here. It all looks horrendous, but I let it fully cure. Then we come back in and we erase most of it with sanding. And then we have ourselves a seamless doodad. And by doodad I mean mech, of course, obviously. I don't forget words. Sometimes I'll also go around a lot more than the little spot, like I'm doing down here, just because I feel like it helps blend it in with the rest of the stuff if it's not just localized to one, but you kind of have it going across. Because then, at least in my mind, it feels blended, if that makes any sense. The closer we get towards detail, the more careful you want to be. Luckily we have panel scraper scribe to handle that. We're going to need it for this step more so than the just generic mudding step. If we're talking wholesale gaps that are being filled in. Right, we're not talking about smoothing off a print line or anything like that. Talking about gaps, and when you do gap filling, it looks really messy. And the goal is damage control when you're putting it down, so when you clean it up, there's less to clean up, and you don't have to redo it. I probably have to redo some of these seams. The goal isn't complete seam deletion for me, rather to keep your eye away from it. Right? Certain spots are just going to be really hard for me to get to. I'm going to do my best, but I'm also wanting to preserve detail. So, like, down in here, it'll be hard to file. It'll be hard to sand down in that middle area. So I'm going to do my best just to kind of make it smooth looking. So when I do go to sand down there, it's just taking the edge off more or less and kind of hiding the crime. And that crime is seams, if that makes sense. This stuff does dry, and I don't want to just drizzle pure acetone onto there, so I'll drizzle it into the mud section, I guess. That was a lot. It was a lot more than I intended. But that'll let me do what I want to do, which is kind of like it's almost like having a paint on a palette, only it's not paint. Anyways, just going in here, cleaning up the seams. And I feel I can kind of directly impact in the best way. Because I don't want them. But I also know, not so much a hopeless cause, but somewhat of a fool's errand of trying to be perfect here. And that should be good enough. You don't want to get too close to where things are going to go, so I just want to more or less do this just to see what it looks like. And get a sense if it's going to take more than one pass at this once I'm done. So you can see, more or less, it's doing alright. Can you see it? Yeah, you can see the seam is there, but it's lessened. And then, the more mud we put on that, when we file it or sand it, smooth it down, the more it'll just kind of be kind of in the seam. I think what I'll do is I'll carefully put that antenna piece in now. So I can get right up to where it has to go. And mud right up to it. That'll help a little bit. Where'd I put the glue? There it is. There I put the glue. Because I don't exactly know what I'm doing. Just gotta figure it out. Put some glue on the antenna area. Not the actual antenna, but where it's going to be connecting to the body. And gently, ever so gently, slide that piece in. Ow. Just like that. And there we have the antenna, which does help for this process. Now I can kind of feather this all the way up to the antenna and not have to worry because the antenna is in. I'm not going all the way to the edge here because I do have the cockpit to put in. But I am going to be pretty liberal with the mud around here because sanding down is going to remove most of it, which is what I want. So I just want to make sure I'm pretty loaded in there when it comes time to sand. And like I said, if I have to do it again, I have to do it again. And I'm just going to let this fully cure. That is something that I will, even though this does kind of cure pretty quick, that is something I 100% will let fully kind of dry cure, whatever you want to call it, before I do anything with it, because it's thick and it's going to take some time. Make sure you put the cap on your glue and your mud. Put that here. Gonna have to clean that off. Get it out of the shot. Alright, so that was the Bondo spot putty. Success. You know, from a distance, it doesn't look too bad. I'm probably going to have to do more, but I can be a lot more careful with it once I sand it down. Put a layer on, sand it down, obscure that seam. That's all I'm doing, is I'm hiding crimes. This piece, I know what it does. It sits up here. Kind of like that. So this piece goes onto the cockpit top. So I'm going to have to make sure when the cockpit goes on, actually, that this can slide on where it's got to go and glue that down. And then there's two side pieces of the glass. And then all that's left is the pieces that connect the arms to the body, which I think have a rotatable section thing for stiffness, but I'll touch some glue in there once I'm ready to leave it. I'm gonna want to eventually try to find a base for this thing, but I am rather pleased. It's a little uneven, but that's not a fault of mine. I think it's just the way the print is. But it'll be hidden when everything's on, and it'll look great. So I'm not too worried about it. Just full disclosure. So it's doing, like I said, Alpha Galaxy. This Mr. Servicer will be able to show up very nicely on the legs and on anything that's mudded, which is why I have everything covered in mud, even if it didn't really need it. It's a nice identifier of what's base coated, which will eventually be the step, but mud never stops. Once I get these pieces, the side pieces on this cockpit, and I get everything else in order, I can put on final touches of mud, and then sand down, get to my liking, and then I can start applying Mr. Surfacer. I have Mr. Color Thinner. I could use the 07, but I like trying the match product with product because I know it was quote-unquote designed for itself, and that'll come a long way in terms of helping things out. But that's the process, and then I gotta figure out, which will be its own video, what I'm gonna do in terms of the different gray. I need gray, and I need darker gray, and I know what I'm gonna do for a near black, but I gotta figure all that out from this collection. So that'll be fun. Anyways, I think I want to call it. I think that's good enough testing of what's going on ever since updating. And good progress made. What was 2 now is 1. I'm not trying to do everything on stream. Not that I don't want to, but I also want to work on it, get past this point. You kind of know what I'm doing at this point. And then if this was a TV show, it would transition via the power of editing, and you would come back to being ready for a base or primer coat. So I'm trying to get through that, but things pop up, and then I end up having to do it on stream anyway. Not that I mind it. One day, I hope to actually interact with you. So if you're watching this, let me know in the comments a good way. What do you think a good way is to advertise about going live? Anyways, I will eventually be doing a mega project update. I have one for a prior update to go up on the channel soon. Then I'll do another. Eventually, once this cockpit's fully on this, and basically once this thing's ready for the primer stage, that'll be the last time you can guess what mech it is, because then I'll just be telling you, because it'll be pretty obvious. So, yeah, that'll be exciting. And that's all I got. So, I hope when I go to do the video game streams that I don't have to do too much rework to get those looking good again. I don't know what happened. You think if the program's gonna update, it wouldn't screw up everything, but you'd be wrong. Anyways, that's it. Share your thoughts. Give it a thumbs up if it was, palatable, and hit that subscribe button. And I'll hopefully be seeing you next time.